Trevor and Kristi, welcome. So great to have you both here. Welcome to Gwinnett.
Thank you, Nick.
Thanks for having us.
One of your favorite 159, maybe your favorite county. Definitely your top 159.
I can't pick favorites, but it's definitely in the top 159.
That's great.
And as a journalist, you have to stay impartial, but of course I'm out here a lot.
That's great. Well, I'm looking forward to the audience learning all about both of you. We're happy you're here in the beautiful Gas South District in the heart of Gwinnett. Kristi, let's start off with you, Kristi Brigman. Tell us, where do you work? What do you do?
Yep. Thank you, Nick. Thanks again for having me. So my name is Kristi Brigman, and I am the Chief Economic Development Officer at the Metro Atlanta Chamber. I have been in that role now a solid 4 months. An expert. But loving that organization. It's been a really fun transition. And prior to that, I was the Deputy Commissioner of Global Commerce at the Georgia Department of Economic Development.
Awesome. Welcome. That's impressive titles.
Thanks. They're a mouthful for sure.
Those are great organizations. Trevor, tell us about yourself.
Yeah, I just keep making up new titles as I go. I'm the managing editor currently of Global Atlanta. Have been at the publication for 17 years now, reporting on how Atlanta is connected to the world in the realms of business, education, culture, trade. So we look at the intersection between Atlanta and the world.
Awesome. Trevor, you and I have known each other maybe 17 years.
Yeah, probably about that.
When you first started, you were a young man.
That's right.
I thought you were a high school intern. You, in fact, were actually a married man.
Yeah, I got
out
married
of college.
young.
Yeah. And Kristi, we've known each other since you were in your role at the Georgia Department of Economic Development.
Yeah.
The Georgia Department of Economic Development, while you were there, did you have any wins? Have you guys won any awards, any recognition?
Yes, you're teeing up nicely that Georgia has been the #1 state for business for the 11 years in a row. It's really incredible.
Is that breaking news?
It is breaking news. I mean, no,
Right.
it has been announced a few times in the past couple of years. That is really important. I mean, I think a lot of the state's success, the region's success has been really tied to the business climate, and we see that in that consistent announcement.
What leads to that kind of recognition?
Yeah, that's a lot of different things. Again, business climate is a really important part of that. Our partnership approach to economic development is something that's always being discussed. We have great programs like Quick Start, which is part of the technical college system that kind of helps with onboarding workforce to companies that are locating in the area. We just bring a lot to the table when you think about companies locating in the region and expanding in the region.
And circling back on what I first said, I'm curious, did you have any project wins while you were there?
Yeah, we did have.
Would maybe read about in the paper?
Yeah, there's a ton going
or in
on.
Global Atlanta.
I got to be there through COVID, so there was a lot of different things happening at all times, but we did see a lot of project activity from both small companies to large companies. I know some of the bigger names that you might have heard of, or the Hyundai project located in Savannah. That was a great one. A great project.
3,000 acres.
Yeah, it's a huge site. It's a great story.
100-acre detention pond. Mm-hmm. It's incredible.
Yeah, and every time you drive by, it's like bigger and bigger and more impressive. So.
Yeah, really, really incredible.
Yeah, and I will say I can vouch, I guess, from the third-party perspective about the partnership approach. I hear that all the time from international investors and folks at consulates and binational chambers, et cetera, about how they're so surprised that people actually get along and work together here in Georgia in ways that they haven't seen in other markets.
When I started 100 years ago, literally 18 years ago, in economic development at the Gwinnett Chamber, it was not so. To the point where there were certain organizations we actually had to pretend publicly that we actually didn't get along with, but then privately we got along with our great partners at the Metro Atlanta Chamber. Everyone, of course, gets along with the Georgia Department of Economic Development. You'd be silly not to. But we really there was a lot of angst at the people above the people actually doing the work. And we really, really worked at it. And I have also heard many times, I know you have, Kristi, probably more than both of us combined, how it's incredible how this whole state works together.
Yeah.
From the regional level, the local level.
Yeah. So not only at the regional, local, and state level, I think we get the feedback that, when a company comes to town for a visit, they're looking at Georgia and maybe 3 other states. So they're going, they line up these visits over the course of a week, possibly. And they come to Georgia, and, we bring in a university panel. We bring in some HR executives to speak to hiring on certain things. We have all of these plans and bring people in, and we're friends with everybody. Like everybody that comes in, who's on the panel, we're all we all know each other. We're all chit-chatting behind the scenes. And I think what we hear is that in a lot of different locations, maybe the economic developers walk in and then, you and I are shaking hands. We're different chambers. We're meeting for the first time. And so it's just a different experience. And so they do kind of get that cordiality, that partnership feeling when they come to Georgia, like, wow, y'all actually know each other and are friends. And I think that really does set us apart.
I totally agree with that. I've heard that. Two other quick things. I've also heard that when you get two competing Metro Atlanta or rural Georgia, it doesn't really matter, two competing, let's say two separate counties are in a meeting, they never say anything negative or disparaging about the other county. We know why, Kristi. We've trained everyone to do that. And if you want to get invited into the next project, the thing is, hey, you've made a great choice. Welcome to Georgia. If you choose any of these counties or cities, you've made a great choice. Yeah. Let me tell you why we're distinctive.
Yep.
I think that's incredible. I don't think that's happening other places.
Yep. Agreed.
And then something that the Metro Atlanta Chamber does better than maybe anyone in the United States is when that C-level executive comes to town, you will organize maybe a dinner with other C-level executives, and you think about who you can bring to the table. The CEO of Delta, Coke, Home Depot, the list, 17 Fortune 500s in Georgia. And what I've also heard from Fortune 500 CEOs that have been recruited here is that all those people know each other. They're not shaking hands for the first time.
Yeah. Yep.
They're like, hey, how was that trip to whatchamacallit? How's your grandkid doing?
Yeah.
And it's real.
Yeah.
And then they want to be there. It's a magnet. They want to be part of that.
Yep.
I think it's very cool. That's probably things that people like our audience has never heard before.
Yeah, you're exactly right. So it's a partnership approach, not just amongst the groups we're talking about from economic development, but it's the broader business community, and that is an important part of it. I think in a lot of metro regions, there's a really competitive aspects to it, right? Like you're not going to get company X and company Y in the same room, certainly not to sit down and really think through really challenging ideas and kind of broader business community considerations or concerns, but in the region, you can really bring people together to talk through things, and for things like a dinner where you're getting to know an executive who's considering relocating their whole family and 150 jobs potentially or something like that, and it does speak really highly of the community.
And I think in part that's a recognition that it's a big world out there. I mean, nobody has a lock on any projects around the world, and as much as Atlanta's and Georgia's brand have grown over the past 20 years to the point where people actually recognize it in certain cases, there's still companies from other markets that tend to gravitate towards the better known places in the U.S. And so I think there's this rising tide lifts all boats mentality that if we can get them here, then we can fight it out on the ground after they arrive here. But cordially, of course. But they have to know about Georgia and the opportunities of Metro Atlanta first before we can even have that discussion about which is the best locale to be in or county.
I was talking to someone today, I mentioned the Hyundai facility in Savannah, but you see that really strong relationship that has expanded in the state to the metro region with their partnership with Georgia Tech. They are renaming of the football field. They're really engaged with Georgia Tech now that they're here. And so, you're right, like that did not land in the metro Atlanta region, but we feel the impact here and embraced in the community here.
It's pretty exciting. Yeah. So we're talking about economic development. We're talking about recruiting companies, and there's a term for it that we should educate the audience on. What is that term?
Are we talking FDI?
We are.
Okay.
What does that stand for? What does that mean?
For foreign direct investment, which basically is just short for when international companies decide to put an operation here in Georgia or anywhere outside of their home market. The direct part is the opening of the actual operation. Could be a subsidiary, it could be a branch of the company itself. But yeah.
And Trevor, you probably I know you have a couple of interesting degrees, but like just the economics wise, like why would we want direct foreign investment to come into a market? Like how does that help the economy?
Well, that's probably better for Kristi to answer, but I'll tell you kind of what I've seen a little bit. I mean, thousands of jobs, right? Like from the perspective of a Hyundai project. Again, if you go back to that, I think it's how many jobs? 7,500 or something. Huge amounts. And then, of course, once they set up their manufacturing facilities, they bring suppliers in that create hundreds more jobs. So I think the core is that they're bringing in productive capacity and hiring people.
And it is important to have a diverse economy. So that is something that we are known for in Gwinnett, the Metro Atlanta region, is the diversity of the companies that we had here. You mentioned our Fortune 500 headquarters. What's so unique about that is that we have just such a broad range of the types of companies. And that serves us well, right? Like in ebbs and flows of our economy, like we're still generally do very well because we have that kind of diversification. But it's not only in the industry, it's also in having international companies, domestic companies as well.
And if we're just doing business here with each other and we're just circulating the same money, there's no growth.
Yeah.
And we'll get into exporting in a moment. And that's a very important part of our economy is exporting because we're bringing new money into the market. And so things that we just sometimes don't even really think about, but someone is going to buy a piece of property. There's the complete real estate transaction, which is usually huge in millions or tens of millions of dollars. And then someone's got to develop it and someone's got to go out to the site and mark it up and get the surveyors out there. So everyone gets a little bit piece of the pie and then it grows the economy.
Yeah, and it trickles down even to the smallest of businesses. You have photographers that are going to show up at the grand opening event. They're usually going to be hired locally.
There'll be a
You've got
caterer.
Caterers. You've got
Serving probably some barbecue.
yeah, and then you've got raw
hope
material
so.
suppliers of raw materials and parts, et cetera, to the suppliers of the larger enterprise. So I mean, it does trickle down quite a bit.
And the ongoing business is all the services that provides. It's the, what do we call it? We've got the direct jobs,
multiplier
the
effect.
indirect, the
Ancillary,
tertiary, ancillary.
Yeah, multiplier effect or whatever.
Yeah, right.
There's also an innovation aspect to this too, because while we are cutting edge on certain technologies in the U.S., doesn't mean we have a lock on everything around the world. So things like semiconductors or electric vehicle batteries, et cetera. These are areas where foreign companies are bringing their know-how into our market and kind of working with our universities directly, helping bridge the gap between our leadership in technology and what's happening out there in the world. And I think that makes the U.S. overall more competitive.
Yeah, I didn't even think that we would talk about this, but we have these centers of excellence. Duracell just announced.
Yeah, great announcement.
Really cool.
Yeah.
I was really proud of all the people that worked on that. And we've got a couple of those here in Gwinnett. What's happening down at Peachtree Corners, Curiosity Lab, is really a center of excellence around technology and mobility. Not just a Georgia center of excellence.
Yeah,
It
and
is.
I was there last night, actually. There was an Israeli event there where they had companies from an incubator in Tel Aviv that were coming through, 6 companies. And they had the president of the Technion, which is the top engineering school in Israel. And so, yeah, it's become a magnet for international companies and institutions to come learn about what's happening here.
Yeah, we're very, very proud. And then the one that I probably am the most proud of is the water tower, which people are like, what's a water tower? It is a name. It's not an actual physical, but it is a building, a 60,000 square foot building up at the Wayne F. Hill treatment plant. And after our 80th international delegation came to tour, we have one of the largest, safest water recycling systems in the United States. We thought, okay, we need to do something that's a little bit nicer than a conference room and a water treatment plant. And that was just the beginning. And then we've turned it into, literally it has 3 international companies. 2 of them, it's their first location in the United States that are incubating right out of that center. We're really, really proud of it.
And it's been a talking point when you meet with monarchs from around the world,
Yes.
like the King of the Netherlands.
Yeah, we were really excited that obviously, if you know anything about the Netherlands, water is really important in their history. And we're really excited. I led a delegation 2 years ago to Leeuwarden, where they have their Center of Excellence for Water, the Water Alliance. And it's been a great partnership. I think I've read about that.
Yeah, somewhere.
Somewhere in Global Atlanta. Thank you, Trevor. Appreciate it. Trevor, in my 18 years at the Gwinnett Chamber, is probably the most consistent person and the most effective person about telling stories, international and global stories, not just for Metro Atlanta, but for Georgia. Nice. And Trevor and I met, Kristi, I'll just share with you.
Yeah.
We were going to Korea for this trip, and we were going to sign a sister city agreement between Gangnam-gu and Gwinnett County. We're one of 5 or 6 sister cities with Gangnam-gu, which is like the Manhattan of Seoul. You've been to Korea, I'm sure. And Trevor said, I'd like to cover this. Can I come? And I didn't know him, and he was the press, so I just immediately didn't trust him. But I had gotten to know him a little bit.
Delete.
And well, I mean, we talked, and I kind of threatened him, and I said, I'm going to welcome you to join us, but I'm used to the, like, if it bleeds, it leads type reporter. I was a recovering mayor, so you don't trust the media. And sorry, media that's listening. But I just said, Trevor, just please don't. Somebody may say something. We're going to be professional. This is a professional trip. Please be fair.
Yeah.
And he was incredible, and I've had complete trust with him since that trip. It was a test, and you were amazing.
Well, I think we see it as a long-term relationship, just as, in the foreign investment world, you have to build relationships with your clients or your prospects. We see that the same way with, you may get one great breaking news story, but then you're going to be shut off from access for the rest of the time. So you might as well get along with the people you're dealing with.
Take the long view.
And take the long view,
for sure.
And this, when you see these companies coming in, they end up expanding multiple times. I'm sure Kristi knows most of the jobs that are created in Georgia from foreign investment are expansions, not greenfield projects. I mean, that's changed a little bit recently, but once you get a customer in, somebody like Toyo Tire, I think, like they've expanded. This Japanese tire company, they've expanded 5-6 times, creating hundreds of jobs each time. So we want to be able to tell those stories continuously over time. We've been around 30 plus years now, so we don't burn bridges where we don't need to.
Yeah, no, I think that's an important point, not just for international companies, but the majority of the growth in the region and the state year over year is from existing industries. The new businesses that locate here make headlines, and as they should, and that's exciting that they're selecting us. It's usually a very competitive process, but that growth that we see in the region is really important. I mean, that's the bread and butter of the activity that we see, and that's such an important endorsement to the business environment and everything that Georgia has going for it.
Kristi, that's so well said, and I forget sometimes myself. But when I was leading economic development in partnership with that was part of my spiel when I was out at the Rotary clubs and Kiwanis clubs. There's somewhere between 23 and 25,000 businesses in Gwinnett County, ebbs and flows. If they all just hire one person, let's say 23,000 new jobs.
Exactly.
I mean, it's incredible.
Yeah.
But not one of those jobs individually would ever be worthy even of a tweet. I mean, it's just not interesting enough. So it's always the exciting. The new is always exciting. So I appreciate you bringing us
the
back.
new and the large. Sometimes the larger companies get more play, but it's these small and medium-sized firms that tend to create the majority of the jobs as well.
Yeah, and they're really competitive. They could have 4 locations across the country, and we really want them to choose Georgia, the Metro Atlanta region, for that growth. It could be in those different markets. And so, I think it is part of that importance of us building relationships with communities and making sure they have those resources they need and those partnerships and what they need to be successful for them to choose Georgia over those other 3 locations.
And of course you have to prioritize. Obviously you have to know who your targets are, but I've seen it over and over again where a company starts a small sales office in Metro Atlanta with 2 people, or maybe they don't even have a direct hire, they're just using a distributor, but they see that it's a good business environment and they end up building up their sales to the point that they can justify the investment of putting boots on the ground, so to speak. And so they end up creating this massive factory on the back of that reputation and that experience. So you never know. You got to keep your relationships solid no matter how large the company is.
We are all involved in this, but for the listener, a one-person sales office leasing one space somewhere, you have to treat that as important as the big FDI project that might be investing millions and hiring hundreds, because you never know where it's going to go. And we have our big win for us that we just continued for 30 years, Mitsubishi Electric. Now it's Mitsubishi Electric Train. They've relocated 5 times in Gwinnett, each time doubling their size. And that started as a small sales office 30 plus years ago before I lived here. And it's just grown and grown and keeps growing.
We just reported about your annual dinner and your Jim Moran awardee, Heraeus, which has been here 40 plus years in Buford. A German company that has technologies that I don't even know how to understand or describe. I tried to in my article, and I got some help from the executives there, but that's an example. That's 40 years of investment and continued growth.
They're originally following Western Electric, which then became Bell Labs, where they co-created fiber that we use across the world. And They do a little. I'm going to be really technical. They stretch some glass down in Norcross. Then they truck it up to Buford and they do some stuff to it. Then they bring it back to Norcross and finish it.
I'm sure the execs from this company who are listening to this podcast are like cringing at y'all's description of this. But
I mean, that's generally.
No.
No. That's like putting it in the real
Technical
description.
glass.
Yeah, technical glass.
Quartzite.
Oh, there you go.
We do our best here in economic
That's right.
We have to be generalists.
Yeah.
I call myself an expert generalist.
An expert journalist like that. But yeah, I do think it's really key to note that the small sales offices are how these international companies get their foot in the door. I think PBS Aerospace is a great example of that. It's a recent announcement where they're bringing a small presence to the Metro Atlanta region, but they had a sales office here for like 10 years before. And that is really important. They get familiar with the region in which they operate with sales offices. They already have an exec team here. So when they do make that next step into assembly or manufacturing or distribution center, whatever it is, they're more likely to go ahead and choose us. And so those are really important relationships to build with those international companies.
So I think we've established that direct foreign investment is important. And there's a lot of people investing a lot of time and effort on this, and it's being widely reported thanks to people like Trevor. But on the other hand, we've got, whatever the number is today, let's say 24,000 businesses in Gwinnett County. We've got another 10,000 sole proprietors. And this may be interesting. And we all have a lot of research that we've worked on, we've read. The Brookings research clearly states that the companies that are best suited that we should invest the most time in expanding is someone expanding their exporting is someone that has already exported because it's not easy.
Yep.
So let's talk about that. Okay. There are probably 100 people that will listen to this that have thought, I have got a product and service that there could be lots of customers outside the United States. What are your suggestions? What do you recommend? What resources exist? And let's just have a discussion about it.
There's a ton there, but I think first of all, the cardinal sin of like export discussions is always talking about the tactics without thinking about the strategy, right? It's like you get people in a room, you talk about how do you get paid, how do you market your product in another language, et cetera. But no one really answers the question of why you should export in the first place. And in the U.S., where I think it's about 13-14% of the economy is exports. It's a much lower percentage in a lot of markets around the world because we have the largest market in the world. So you can survive for quite a long time off of just selling to Alabama or Tennessee or South Carolina, and you can create a great business that's regional in nature, and you may never think about sending your product abroad. So I think the question is why in the first place. And I think, from those in the know at the Trade Department of the Georgia Department of Economic Development and other places, they talk about how exporting companies tend to be more resilient. They tend to pay higher wages. They tend to, and you can argue whether this is correlation or causation. Like maybe the company was healthier in the first place, but I think it's pretty indisputable that these companies tend to be more innovative. Again, pay more. And they're resilient to downturns, to your point about diversification, right? You can't, if you have 50 markets instead of one, then obviously if one market goes down, you've got some other places to carry your business. So I think that's a starting point on the why you should do this, but not every product is suited for export. And you kind of have to think about how to adapt the product in certain circumstances to make it appealing elsewhere. The how people have gotten into exporting is something that I've been interested to report on over the years because we have this sort of small little franchise of reports called Export Stories. So we actually profile the export operations of various companies here in Georgia. And you would like to think that it's this big strategic enterprise that people think about, which markets around the world are best suited for my product? But it tends to be these intangibles. Like I've said, it either is I remember reporting on Winton Machine, which is one of your great Gwinnett manufacturing companies. They got an inquiry on their website that led to a huge sale in South Korea. And so then they thought, well, we actually might need to be pursuing these markets. If there's fruit falling, then we might need to shake the tree a little bit more. And so American companies in a lot of cases tend to be pulled into exporting. And once they see the benefit of it, then they go after it more strategically. And there's lots of examples of that. I could keep going on, but
Well, I want to take a commercial break, and then when we come back, Kristi, let's discuss what are the resources. Like you have this. Okay, I think Trevor asked you, like, what's your strategy? I think there's a place that I need to do. How do I do it? We'll talk about that next. But we're going to hear from our great friends at Gwinnett Magazine.
Hey guys, I'm David Greer, and I'm the publisher of the Guide to Gwinnett, and we are so excited this year to be working with the Chamber to produce what we think is going to be the biggest, best, most comprehensive guide to Gwinnett ever. Going to be a lot of pages in there that tout the Chamber's services and basically just a pro-business cheer for all you guys out there working day to day, making Gwinnett what it is. So I invite all of you to step up and advertise. We've got some special deals for Chamber members, exclusive deals, special discounts. Call on us if we can help you. Look forward to having you in this year's Guide to Gwinnett.
So we were talking about exporting and not just I'm hyper focused on the success of Gwinnett companies in my role as the president of the Gwinnett Chamber, but I am really excited about just the opportunity for Metro Atlanta and Georgia, and we have so many cool resources. So if you all want to chat about those, let the listeners know what's available, what's out there.
Yeah, so you mentioned a situation which is like organically happened. There was a South Korean company that reached out and was interested in buying a product. So I think that is a great way to enter another market. But some other companies, smaller and mid-sized companies, might be thinking like, hey, I think this product, like you said, Nick, is going to be really successful in this other market. But it is really important. It can be very costly to really move into another market. And so you really have to think through that very intentionally and do a lot of market research about that. There's a great resource at the Georgia Department of Economic Development. There's a whole trade team, and they work with companies day in and day out. They're divided up by different industry sectors, and they help sort of look into the market research for different countries that a company might be interested. The deputy commissioner of that team's name is Liz Ann, and she's a great resource. So I think reach out to that team is a great place to start when you're considering a new market.
And they have 12 offices around the world that provide the services free of charge. So, and the majority of the companies they help are small businesses. If you look at the recent trade report, they just hit an export record of, I think, $53 billion.
Yeah, that's a record.
The headline, the quote from the governor there was talking about how I think it was 87% of the companies that are engaged in exporting in Georgia are small businesses. So it's not something that's insurmountable if businesses want to get into it. But in addition to the state government, the U.S. government has resources around the world. You mentioned in our break the Gold Key service that the U.S. Commerce Department has, where they will introduce you to vetted potential buyers. Another thing you should think about is trade shows. So you don't have to necessarily go international to go international, if that makes sense. There's right downtown Atlanta, there's tons of trade shows that are happening. There is funding available for from various sources for companies to participate in trade shows. And Kristi, you didn't mention the Metro Export Challenge, which I will tee you up to talk about how the Metro Atlanta Chamber has led this initiative to help particularly small companies here in the metro area.
Thank you. So
involved.
That is great. I have to shout out to Stephen Harrigan, who runs that program. He is such an incredible resource and really also helps companies who are looking to export. So feel free to reach out to him as well. But so he leads something called the Metro Export Challenge, and that's a great opportunity. So small businesses sort of apply and build a business case for what they're looking to export, talk about their product, and then talk about the market that they're looking to enter into. And then at this event that we hold annually through the chamber, we select, small number of companies. Last year it was 6 different companies who then pitch, and they talk about their products, and there's a panel that includes several professionals in the trade area, like Liz Ann, the deputy commissioner of the department I mentioned a few minutes ago, is one of those, and they'll select winners, a first, second, and third place, and then a grant is given to those team members for those companies so that allow them to take that next step into exports. It's a great opportunity also to build a relationship with the professionals who have so much knowledge in exporting and sort of that international business development aspect. So, some of these groups, you mentioned trade shows, do take trade shows around the world and bring small, medium, business-sized companies who are in that industry with them. And so it's a great opportunity to kind of engage as you're looking to expand internationally. Take that next step.
Going back to my point earlier about how companies are sort of head down doing their own thing, selling to the U.S. market. A lot of times they don't have the bandwidth or don't feel like they have the bandwidth to explore international markets because it's too big. It's just too intimidating of an idea. And so if you can boil it down to, hey, go on this one trip, we're going to reimburse you. If you're a Metro Export Challenge winner, you're going to be, which Gwinnett is a big part of as well, we should mention. you're going to get reimbursed for the expenses of flying there, going to the trade show, et cetera, or at least to the tune of $5,000 for the first round winners. That takes a little bit of that fear and kind of lifts the veil a little bit on the opportunities. And I've heard over and over that companies, once they get out there and they see the opportunities, they tend to start creating that strategy.
Well, we are the least traveled nation in the world, so there's fear and fear of getting out there. And you made a really good point. If this was Europe, there'd be 50 different countries,
Yep.
and they're some of the richest countries in the world if you break them apart. And so there's really we don't need to. But in fact, if you want to continue to grow, there is a great opportunity, and you're not going alone. That's where that fear is reduced, because you're going with these trusted partners. May it be at the Georgia Department of Economic Development, the U.S. Department of Commerce, and just because I don't think people know. We have these embassies and these consulate offices all over the world. And one of their main, top 3 things is to expand U.S. products and services abroad.
Yep.
And every time we do a trip at the Gwinnett Chamber, we will do a breakfast, in-country briefing. Actually, Pat, the first one I ever went on was with the Commissioner of Economic Development, Pat Wilson, and we were in Shanghai. And we did it, and I was like, I didn't know we could ask to do this. I thought we'd be wasting their time.
Yeah.
I have done them all over the world, and they are, first of all, the most interesting people. These are Americans that decided to go to work for their country. And they have the coolest stories because they're only places every 3 years.
Yep.
They usually typically go to a really cool location, and then they go to a not so cool location, and they have an incredible story. Many people have found their significant others, their children have been raised abroad. I'm always more interested in their story than what they're doing.
In the briefing? No, you like the technical briefing too.
I actually do. I mean, I always love to the nuances of
Yeah.
how does the United States get along with this country? What does this country think of America? I was in the Netherlands, and they had marketing research on what each generation of the Dutch, what they thought about Americans. That was really interesting. It was just super interesting stuff. But so we have all these great resources, and literally, if a listener was interested, one of the places I would is go to Global Atlanta and just in the search bar, find 10 stories. But you mentioned the Georgia Department of Economic Development. If you're connected to some of the big organizations in economic development, like the Partnership Gwinnett, the Metro Atlanta Chamber, the Cobb Edge, I think it's called, they are all promoting and encouraging people to apply. Trevor, I appreciate you bringing it up. Partnership Gwinnett is a founding investor, one of the first. There was 5 of us.
Yeah.
It was the Metro Atlanta Chamber, it was Georgia Power, it was the Gwinnett Chamber, and I don't even remember who the other 2 were, but they weren't other chambers. It was other kind of partners. And that has just grown and grown over the decade. I was looking it up, preparing for this, and forgot how long ago it was. But I've been doing this for a while.
Just yesterday.
Just yesterday, yes.
I think that gets to your point earlier about fear. I mean, that gets to the heart of our publication and why we exist. I mean, it's to show that there's opportunity as well as risk, right? I think in the U.S. we tend to see out there as a potential threat, but we don't necessarily engage with the idea that it could be an opportunity as well, or as much, because the unfamiliar breeds fear, right? So I think any export or international business exercise, should start with kind of a fear setting, right? Like a reorientation or reevaluation of what the fear is, what the threat is versus what the potential might be. And of course, there's challenges in doing international business. And speaking of stories, you hear the craziest things when companies try to sell their products abroad about, sometimes you hear horror stories about not getting paid, et cetera. But I think what you'll find is that there are enough resources out there that once you start peeling back the layers of what's available, even for free, for U.S. companies trying to do business internationally, most people don't know that this ecosystem exists. And once they see it, they see the opportunity, they see that there are ways to mitigate the risk.
Right. Can someone explain XM Bank?
I can try.
I mean, just very generically. I could try.
I've been able
Trevor can take
to
that
interview a couple of the I guess administrators or the presidents of the bank, so I should be able to. But basically, there's a lot of products that they offer, but the 2 things that I've heard about most are export credit insurance. So when you're kind of providing credit to your buyers, the bank can back that, can guarantee that to make sure you get paid in the event of non-payment from the buyer. And then the other thing is they will actually make a loan. This is generally on bigger infrastructure projects and things like that, or like Boeing airplanes or whatever. But they'll make a huge loan to the foreign buyer for the purchase of American products. So they're actually funding the foreign buyer, and the American worker should be the beneficiary of that. So yeah, that's the basics. There's a lot more they do.
And that exists, and that's our government creating those services. It's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, and I'm. You talked about the export challenge. I'm on the District Export Council of Georgia. It's called the Georgia DEC for short, but it's basically a Commerce Department sanctioned group of private sector folks that helps kind of guide people into exporting. And the Georgia DEC is a mentor partner of the Export Challenge, and so part of the benefit of becoming an Export Challenge winner is not only the $5,000, but it's the access to the ecosystem and the mentorship from people that have been involved in exporting for many years and know how to really set the expectations.
one of the things that was really interesting for people that win the Export Challenge, you've mentioned the services that you provide through the organization you're a part of, but just getting in the network, knowing the people that work at the Metro Atlanta Chamber that are doing that every day, the folks at the Georgia Department of Economic Development, just that ecosystem. And so when you're going, okay, maybe you got your $10,000 grant, that's great. But now someone's going to another conference, and if you're in our circles of economic development and you're like, oh, we probably should be inviting them, or at least taking some of their literature.
Yeah.
And that's probably the biggest. They all appreciate the original existing. Hey, I got some recognition. I went through this program, but it's the years after. I've talked to people that were in the years 1 through 5, and it's been 10 years later. They're absolutely like, that was a turning point in our organization. Because then I just realized I could call. I have a problem. There's 10 people I could call versus trying to struggle with it myself now. I just think it's very, very cool. And I want to circle back on something that you said. And I thought this is a route you were going to maybe go. Maybe you were, and we got distracted. But you actually don't need to go to Hartsfield-Jackson Airport and get on a plane to do global business, because we're Metro Atlanta, and the world is coming here every day with the busiest airport. But a lot of the people are getting off and going to the World Congress Center, or they're going to the Gas South District for a conference. And in about 7 weeks, we're going to have probably 5,000 Koreans from around the world, most of them from Korea. But this is literally a international conference where Korean business people from around the world gather. They typically do it in Korea. The last couple of years they've done it. They did it in California. They did a last-minute switch and chose the population of the third largest amount of Koreans in the United States is right here in Metro Atlanta, with more than half here in Gwinnett. And so we're going to have all these people here. And we know one organization is bringing 400 companies alone, because we can only fit 400 booths. They're already sold out with one of the groups. And that's not an uncommon thing. And so let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got a lot to say on that, but if you want to
No,
start.
I will say, I think that we as economic developers don't appreciate sometimes the opportunity in our backyard. And I think that's a good point to make for business owners too, and business people to be thinking about. So we, of course, are also going to trade shows all the time, and we're going to events across the country and around the world to make connections. But when you look at the list of trade shows and events that are happening at Gas South, at downtown Atlanta, it is incredible. And so that's actually something our team's been talking about this year is, we do have plans to go to the different major shows that we normally do, but wait a minute, look at what is coming. MROs America is going to be here in April. It's the largest MRO show in the world, and that's going to be here in Atlanta. Who all is coming? How do we engage? What should we do around that? And so I think it's a great point. Look at the shows that are coming in the industries of interest to you, or if there's particular countries that are of interest to you, and see what's coming to the region, and take advantage of that opportunity. I think that, sometimes we use relationships for outreach, but we're also cold calling, and that's a great opportunity. Email a company, email somebody and ask to meet. I mean, they are generally here to do that as well, and I found fairly receptive to meetings from individuals. So I think, you make a great point. Focus on also what's here, because it is really international, and it is a lot of opportunity.
Yeah, well, you teed Global Atlanta up very well, because our slogan is "The world is here," and the idea is you don't have to look abroad necessarily. We've got enough of the world here in Atlanta that you can at least take that first step. Of course, everybody knows Atlanta hosted the Olympics 30 years ago, almost 30 years ago. I've heard Andrew Young speak about this, and the way Atlanta got the Olympics was that he went to people he knew from the African diaspora here in Atlanta, got them to connect him back to their home countries, and was able to win those votes through those relationships. That's a very oversimplified version, of course, but
that thing where he was the ambassador to the United Nations.
well, I mean that helped. He
okay,
had his own relationships too, but I mean I've heard him describe it that way. That he said, "Who do we know in Africa?" And we looked around at the table here in Atlanta and said, we can get connected. And
Can I do a pause just because you brought him up? Sure. He was here last Sunday in Gwinnett. Have you had a chance to listen to him?
Oh,
I know you have.
Yeah, many times.
I mean, it is literally, it's like, I'm like pinching myself as there's a living legend.
Yeah, every time.
And the guy is such a diplomat.
Yeah.
I mean, they were trying to get him in this interview to maybe make some comments about the current changes that are happening politically in the United States, and he wouldn't even get close to it. He's such a diplomat, just a gentleman. I mean, really impressive.
I think that's a kind of example of the approach that businesses can take too. You can sort of look around yourself first of all before you start getting on a plane. And we kind of beat these resources to death. But if you think about the 75 countries that have consulates or trade offices here in Georgia, you've got many binational chambers. Of course, Gwinnett has hosted this multi-chamber mixer event for many years. These organizations have connections back home, and it often intersects with when you have a trade show, right? So if the IPPE, the poultry show, is coming to Atlanta in January, like it does every year, the Brazilians are generally going to have a big delegation, and the consulate and trade office of the Brazilian government here is going to have a sub-event as part of that trade show, where if you're a company that needs to deal with Brazil, perhaps that relationship you built with the consulate can lead to you getting invited to that event. So these are the kind of things where you sort of look around and you find opportunities.
I'd go a step further. If you are working those relationships, they can't answer and solve every problem of every company coming. And we'll get calls sometimes saying, okay, they're looking for some space. They need some help. They need an attorney. They need a CPA.
Right.
And we're happy to help our members out and make those connections.
Yeah,
and the great thing in Metro Atlanta, and I'm, again, unapologetically hyper-focused on Gwinnett, we have the language for everything. I mean, in Gwinnett County, we have every...
Right.
You name the country, we have that language. The realities we have again the most foreign-born residents. It puts us such a competitive advantage, not to the region, to the world.
Yeah.
And we're really, really proud of that.
Well, I can attest. We had an event we hosted with the Vietnamese governor of a Vietnamese province recently, and he was going to be giving a speech in Vietnamese. And I, as the organizer of the event, had to make sure that he could be understood, and I was able to find someone from the Gwinnett, member of the Gwinnett Chamber that had Vietnamese language background and was able to translate for him. So, but that's a good example. I mean, you have these heritage communities that can be conduits to their own home countries or original countries. And that's, I think, an untapped resource here in a lot of cases, because many times people that are foreign born have relationships back home, but they don't see it as a big leap to sell to their country of origin, right, where they were born. They have the linguistic capabilities. They understand the local landscape. So if you, as a company that's looking into those markets, need a connecting point into those places, it's very easy to work with someone who's already working there or has a heritage from that place. And obviously Gwinnett's a great place to do that.
Well, all good points. As we start wrapping up, is there any initiative outside of the Export Challenge that you want to share that the Metro Chamber is up to?
That's a good question. So we are very focused on building our international relationships right now. So we focus both on the exports and the foreign direct investment piece that we talked about. So we're looking at sort of a more data-driven approach as to how we're going to be targeting different countries and building those relationships over the next few years. And so that's sort of our focus from an international perspective right now. We're also looking at how do we, in those kind of key markets, build relationships with our members, our investors, and be thinking through how we can support those in those relationships and kind of bring that approach through. So
Y'all still doing the ecosystem approach?
we do. So we have an ecosystem that's separate from our international team right now. They are focused on different industries. Yeah. And so we have 4 people who are focused on different things, fintech and software and sort of looking at AI right now. Another one is focused on aerospace and defense. We have someone focused on clean tech, and we have someone who's focused on advanced manufacturing and supply chain. And so they are really looking at, making sure that we understand all the companies of all sizes that are in those industries, sort of an asset mapping. Who do we have in the region that does what? Who do we do? What does that look like? What do we do well? And then also from there, what are we missing from the supply chain perspective for each of those industries? Who should we be recruiting? So kind of looking at what a strategy is for recruiting companies. And then also, I think it's important work that they do, but how is Atlanta differentiated in those industries? So where are we strong? Where can we grow? Where are we differentiated? Sort of what is our pitch? What is our story in those industries? So that's what we're working through with those industry perspectives. But yes, the ecosystem team does a great job, and that's definitely.
And I've found that y'all do a great job seeing where the ecosystems and the now from the past couple of years. So you can use our events as an on-ramp to get these personal connections that may help you do business internationally. Tomorrow we're hosting an event on South Africa, for instance, and we've hosted, I think, 6 or 7 events already this year in 2025.
Your events are fantastic. I've been attending for 2 decades, and I appreciate it. I've been engaged with the Metro Chamber.
Of course,
for 2 decades. An incredible organization. I really appreciate, you two are literally experts in this field, and very honored that you came all the way out here to Gwinnett to chat with us, and we really appreciate it. What's the best way they can get a hold of your organization?
So you can just email me for any of the things we've talked about.
I didn't want to throw that out there. You are the Chief Economic Development Officer.
Yeah, no, feel free to email me if it's export related. I mentioned Stefan kind of runs the Metro Export Challenge, but reach out and we'll get you to the right person on our team to chat with. So.
Great. I'm sure we'll put the details unless you want to say your email.
Oh, yes. It's just kbrigman@macoc.com.
Incredible. Wow. You're so approachable. Trevor?
Yeah, same way. You can always.
You have people. They have to contact your people.
Yeah, sure. You can always find me on any Global Atlanta article that I've written. You can always find T. Williams at globalatlanta.com. But I would emphasize subscribing to newsletters. We've got about 10,000 subscribers around Georgia, and the feedback we get is that it opens up kind of a new way of thinking and understanding of, again, the ecosystem or the international landscape here that people weren't aware of. So and it's all free. So please engage with our website and subscribe to our newsletters.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.